The city was a restless beast that marched its nights thick with a damp chill that clung to your skin like a whispered sin. I'm Lauren, and this isn't my story, not really. I'm just the one who saw it unfold, the one who couldn't look away when the shadows grew heavy with forbidden desire. It was my friend Sarah and her yoga instructor Ethan, a man with a voice like warm honey and eyes that burned with a hunger you could feel across a quiet studio. Sarah was the spark, and he was the fire that consumed her. Sarah was 32, all soft curves and quiet intensity, with a smile that could unravel a man's restraint and a body that made you notice. She'd been married to David for 7 years, a man who loved her, but whose long hours at the architectural firm left her restless, yearning for something she couldn't name. Ethan was her yoga instructor, 35, lean and sculpted, with hands that moved with a purpose that made your pulse quicken. I saw it the first time I joined Sarah for a private yoga session at his studio, the way the air shifted when Ethan adjusted her pose, his eyes finding hers like a magnet finding north. I was there that evening, tagging along to try out a late-night yoga class Sarah had raved about. The studio was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums with secrets, its windows fogged from the March drizzle outside. Sarah was on her mat, her leggings and tank top clinging to her curves, her hair pulled back but loose enough to tease her neck. "Lauren, you'll love this," she said, her voice light, but her eyes restless, darting toward Ethan as he set up the room. He was there in a fitted shirt that hugged his frame, his movements calm but deliberate, his gaze cutting through the dim light to find her. He nodded at me, slow and polite, but it wasn't me he was after. We started the session, the three of us, the city's pulse muffled by the studio's walls, the soft glow of candles casting flickering shadows across the floor. Sarah stretched into a pose, her body arching, her tank top riding up to reveal the curve of her waist, the soft skin glowing in the warm light. Ethan's eyes followed, lingering on the line of her hip, unblinking like a predator watching its prey. I felt it then, the undercurrent sharp and electric like a wire sparking in the dark. They weren't talking much, but their silence was loud, heavy with things that shouldn't be said. I should have focused on my own mat, but I didn't. I stayed caught in the pull of something forbidden. Sarah exhaled into a stretch, her head tilting back, her throat exposed. Ethan's gaze was fixed, intense, like a man staring at his own downfall. "You're holding back," he said, his voice low, guiding, but edged with something darker. She met his eyes, her lips parting just enough to let the moment hang. "Maybe I need more guidance," she said, her voice a soft challenge, her eyes locked on his. The air shifted, grew thicker, like the moment before a spark catches fire. I shifted in my pose, my skin prickling. I wasn't supposed to see this, but I couldn't stop watching. The session continued and the room grew warmer, the air thick with tension. Sarah's tank top slipped further, revealing a hint of lace, and she didn't fix it. Ethan's voice grew softer, his instructions more deliberate, each one landing like a touch. "You're too tense here," he said, stepping behind her, his hands hovering near her shoulders. "Let me help." Sarah's smile was slow, almost dangerous. "Go ahead," she said, her voice a low hum, her eyes never leaving his. I felt like an intruder, but my feet wouldn't move. The candlelight pulsed, but it couldn't drown out the beat of my heart. Then it happened. Ethan adjusted her pose, his hands grazing her waist, slow, deliberate, like he knew she was watching. Sarah's breath caught her body, leaning into his touch, her movements fluid like she was inviting more. He lingered, his fingers brushing her hip, accidental, or maybe not. She didn't pull away. She held the pose, her eyes searching his face, her lips parted. "Ethan," she murmured so low I barely heard it. "This feels different." His hands paused, his voice a soft challenge. "Maybe it's supposed to," he said, his eyes locked on hers. My heart was pounding now, my mouth dry. I knew I should say something, break the spell, but I didn't. I was trapped, a witness to something I couldn't unsee. Sarah shifted her body closer to his, her hip brushing his hand. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in the air, thick with want. I mumbled some excuse about needing water and stood to leave, but their eyes were on each other, not me. As I reached the door, I glanced back. Ethan's hand was on her lower back, his thumb tracing slow circles. She wasn't stopping him. I stepped outside the March drizzle, cooling my skin, but it couldn't wash away what I'd seen. Sarah so reckless, so alive in her desire. Ethan a man who knew exactly what he was doing. And me the fool who saw it all and did nothing. I walked to my car, the city's lights blurring, but I couldn't shake the image of his hand on her, the way her eyes burned when she looked at him. I knew it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Days later, I saw Sarah at a coffee shop, her fingers wrapped around a mug, her eyes distant like she was chasing a memory she couldn't catch. She looked different, sharper, like a woman who'd tasted something forbidden and couldn't forget the flavor. I sat across from her, my heart heavy with what I'd seen. I wanted to ask about Ethan, about that night, about the way his touch lingered on her skin, but the words wouldn't come. She didn't bring it up either, just smiled, that half smile of hers, the one that hid more than it showed. "You okay?" I asked, my voice too careful. She shrugged, her sweater slipping down her shoulder, revealing a faint mark, a shadow maybe, or something else. "Just restless," she said, her voice low, like she was confessing to the coffee instead of me. "The studio? It's too much, too heavy." I knew she wasn't talking about the yoga. She was talking about him, Ethan, the way he filled every silence, every pose with that slow burning intensity of his. I didn't push her. I couldn't. But I saw it in her eyes, the hunger, the guilt, the thrill of crossing a line she couldn't uncross. She leaned forward, her perfume sharp and sweet, and said, "You ever feel like you're falling into something you can't stop?" I nodded, though I didn't know what she meant. Not really. But I'd seen it that night, the way her body leaned toward his, the way her breath caught when his fingers grazed her waist. It wasn't just desire. It was something deeper, something that clawed at you until you bled. That night I went back to the studio. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to see if the air still crackled, if the mats still held their secrets. The studio was dark, the candles low, and I heard soft noises from the back room. I crept closer, my heart pounding, and saw the door slightly ajar. Sarah was there, her leggings and top replaced by a loose silk shirt, her hair loose and falling across her shoulders. Ethan was there too, standing close, his shirt off, his eyes on her like she was the only thing in the world. David was at work, oblivious, probably sketching blueprints. I stood in the shadows, hidden by a partition, my pulse loud in my ears. "Sarah?" He called, his voice low, rough, like he'd been holding it in too long. She turned her hair, catching the candlelight, and stepped toward him too close. Her hand brushed his arm as she reached for her water bottle, and I saw it again. The spark, the heat, the way her fingers lingered just a second too long. He didn't move away. Instead, he looked at her, his eyes dark, unreadable, like a man staring at his own ruin. "You're making this hard," he said, but his voice was weak, like he was begging her to prove him wrong. She didn't answer, just tilted her head, her lips parting slightly. The air between them was alive, pulsing like the moment before a kiss you know you shouldn't take. I wanted to shout to break the spell, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the weight of what I was seeing. Sarah stepped closer, her bare foot brushing his, her shirt slipping to show the curve of her chest. "What if I don't want to stop?" she whispered so soft I barely heard it. His hand twitched like he was fighting himself, but then it was on her waist, his fingers digging into her skin, pulling her closer. The world seemed to slow, the candlelight wrapping them in a haze of shadow and glow. His thumb traced the curve of her hip, slow, deliberate, like he was memorizing her. She didn't pull away. Her breath was shallow, her chest rising and falling too fast. I could see it, the want, the need, the way it consumed them both. It was wrong, so wrong, but it was alive, burning brighter than anything I'd ever seen. I turned away, my face hot, my heart racing. I shouldn't have stayed, but I did, caught in the pull of their sin. When I looked back, they were closer, her hand on his chest, his fingers tangled in her hair. The air was thick with their heat, their guilt, their hunger. "Sarah," he said again, his voice a low growl like a man drowning. She didn't answer, just leaned into him, her lips brushing his jaw so soft it was barely a touch. But it was enough to shatter the last thread of restraint. His hand slid lower, pulling her against him, and I saw the way her body melted into his, the way her eyes closed like she was surrendering to something bigger than herself. The back room was a haze of shadows and candlelight, their bodies pressed together in a rhythm that was both beautiful and wrong. Her breath was ragged, her hands clutching at his shoulders, her eyes half open, burning with a mix of guilt and need. His touch was relentless, his fingers gripping her hair, guiding her closer. His lips brushing her neck, her ear, her lips. She gasped, her body arching into his, her shirt slipping higher, exposing the soft curve of her thigh. It was raw, desperate, a dance of desire that left no room for reason. I felt the heat of it, the shame of it, the thrill of it like a pulse in my own veins. They were lost in each other, consumed by the fire they'd lit, and I was the witness, the one who saw it all and did nothing. I left then, my steps unsteady, the night pressing against me like a weight. I didn't want to see what came next, but I knew. I knew the way their bodies would move, the way their breaths would tangle, the way the night would swallow their sin. Sarah, so reckless, so alive in her desire. Ethan, a man who'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. And me, the witness, the one who saw it all and did nothing. The studio loomed behind me, its windows dark, its secrets darker. The weeks that followed were a blur of whispers and glances, each one heavier than the last. Sarah didn't talk about it, but she didn't have to. It was written all over her, in the way her eyes lingered on the empty spaces where Ethan had been, in the way her fingers trembled when she poured her coffee. I saw her less. But when I did, she was a shadow of herself, caught between the thrill of what she'd done and the guilt that clawed at her soul. Ethan was no better. I caught him once outside the studio, his face tight, his eyes haunted like a man who'd tasted paradise and knew he'd burn for it. David was around more, his presence a stark contrast to the fire that had raged in his absence. Sarah and Ethan moved around him like ghosts, their touches careful, their smiles forced. But I saw it the way their eyes met across a room, the way their fingers brushed when they passed each other, like they couldn't help themselves. It was a secret too big to hold, a fire too hot to contain. I wanted to tell David to shatter the lie, but I didn't. I was complicit, bound by what I'd seen, what I hadn't stopped. One night I went back to the studio uninvited. The air was thick with the scent of rain and sandalwood. the moon low and heavy casting shadows that danced like lovers. Sarah was in the garden behind the studio, her dress white and sheer clinging to her like a second skin. Ethan was there too, his shirt open, his chest rising and falling too fast. They didn't see me, didn't know I was there hidden in the shadows of the trellis. The air between them was alive, pulsing with the same heat I'd felt that first night, but now it was sharper, more desperate, like they knew the end was coming. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, raw, like a man pleading for salvation. She turned to him, her eyes wide, her lips parted, and I saw the war in her, the want, the shame, the need that burned hotter than both. "We can't keep doing this," he said. But his hand was already on her, his fingers tracing the curve of her neck, sliding down to her shoulder. She shivered, her body leaning into his touch, her breath shallow. "Then why don't you stop?" she whispered, her voice a challenge, a dare. He didn't answer, just pulled her closer, his hands gripping her waist, his lips brushing her throat. She gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair, her body arching against his. The moonlight painted them in silver, their shadows merging into one. It was beautiful and terrible, a dance of desire and destruction. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was trapped, a witness to their sin, their surrender. His hands slid lower, pulling her dress up, exposing the curve of her thigh, the soft skin glowing in the moonlight. Her breath was ragged, her moans soft and desperate, like she was drowning in him. The night seemed to hold its breath, the world narrowing to the two of them, their bodies pressed together, their desire a living thing. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking, and he answered with a kiss deep and hungry, like he was trying to consume her. I saw the way her body responded, the way her hands clutched at him, the way her eyes closed as if she could block out the world. But the world was there, waiting, ready to judge. I left before it went further, my steps silent, my heart pounding. I didn't want to see the end, but I knew it was coming. Sarah and Ethan caught in a web they'd spun themselves, bound by desire and doomed by it. The studio loomed behind me, its windows dark, its secrets heavier than ever. I drove away, the night swallowing me, but I couldn't escape the image of them, their bodies tangled, their breaths, mingling, their sin burning brighter than the moon. So here I am, telling you this story, my voice shaking with the weight of it. I saw it all and I did nothing. Maybe that's my sin too. If this hit you hard, if it stirred something in you, hit that like button, share it with someone who gets it, and subscribe for more stories that cut deep. Leave a comment. Tell me what you'd have done, or don't just let it simmer. Check out the next video, because trust me, the shadows have more to say. Until then, keep watching, keep feeling, and don't look away.